Hello everyone, welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, my last one for a little while, but I will definitely get into that in the last video of this fourth week. But nonetheless, I am here to discuss my favorite underrated Disney songs. Now these songs in particular are the ones that I feel that people don't really talk about so much a lot when it comes to Disney. They sort of leave these songs kind of in the background, either because it was from a particular film that wasn't really that well recognized, or it's from a film that's probably more recognized but it doesn't seem to be noted so much for the songs, or noted for that particular song within the film. So I thought it would be interesting to sort of go through these various picks that I've chosen and kind of highlight to you why I like each of the songs. Now the first one is called The World's Greatest Criminal Mind, and this is from The Great Mouse Detective, which came out, I believe, in around the 80s era, before The Little Mermaid. And for the most part, the whole title, as you can probably tell, is a villain song, and Vincent Price actually does the voice of this particular villain named Ratigan of the Great Mouse Detective film. And basically he's sort of, it's sort of a self-gloating song. He's basically kind of just stating his intentions, and within those intentions of what he wants to do, people sort of end up putting him on sort of a pedestal, so to speak. And you'll definitely see this once you, and if you choose to watch the whole scene where he sings the song. Now, I think this song is fairly intended to be visual, because if you look at the way the animation is done, and how Vincent Price basically sings out each line or talks in each line, because again, the song kind of goes from singing to then kind of talking and then singing again. You'll notice how each kind of frame of animation feels so alive with the emotions. Like, you do feel that this villain is sophisticated. You do feel that this villain is expressing the emotions and the reactions to certain things that happen within the song as he's singing it. And I think that's fairly telling when a song can do that. It can make you try to picture things visually, and when it can paint a picture, and in doing so have such a great voice actor do the part, it really makes, I think, the song as a result shine. And that's why I think this song is so profound in its own right, because it just has this good balance and mixture of how it presents itself with the animation, and how Vincent Price basically sings out every line within his song. And it's nice to see this kind of a sophisticated, like-ish villain, because even though he does have this air of sort of likability, there's also something sinister within what he is saying within the lyrics, and it's quite fascinating to listen to at times. And you can kind of tell that and especially with a lot of Disney villains, a lot of their intentions are made through a plan that they have. And even though Be Prepared is sort of inspired by a plan, this song kind of does follow this similar route. But it I think does it to a way in a completely different way. And that way is that way just comes off so sophisticated and so devious at the same time that it's just such an entertaining song to watch. It's just very engrossing, and I just love listening to it. It's just one of those songs where you really you really get the sense of what it's trying to grasp, and you almost want to be a villain when you listen to it. You almost want to go up and do the same things that he does, even though what the song says he has done is can be a little gruesome-esque at times, especially when in the when the choir basically of mice basically sing, worse than those widows or orphans you've drowned, you're the best of the worst around. You know, these are not really pleasant lyrics. This isn't somebody that you want to aspire to, but at the same time there is this really cool, entertaining, and sophisticated factor within Ratigan's character that you can't help but not be completely engrossed by the song. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a very fun villain song. It's not really so menacing as a lot of other Disney villain songs are, where you feel like that there is something fairly evil or maniacal about it. For example, I feel like Ursula's song, like Unfortunate Souls, as well as Be Prepared, as well as Hellfire, they seem to maintain this fairly dark imagery. But this song takes place in a well-lit room. You know, everything's all fancy. There's nice jewels all over the place. You do feel like that this song is taking you into a completely different atmosphere. And that's what I really enjoy about the song. And just the visuals and how they draw Ratigan, I think, just really brings out his character, as well as Vincent Price doing the voice. So this is definitely one song that is, I think, more engrossing when you see it visually, or can have a picture as to what you will see visually. But at the same time, I think it still can be enjoyable without having a visual aid and just listening to the song. But at the same time, there's just this charm to the song that I haven't really seen in a lot of Disney villain songs, so it cannot not be on my list. I just cannot not mention this song because it's just a blast to listen to. I enjoy it a lot. Even to this day, I'll never get over that song because it just has this blend of sophistication and at the same time sinister undertone, and at the same time has sinister undertones that really make it a perfect blend of what you would expect out of a villain song and what you would expect out of Ratigan's character. So yeah, I think that's definitely what the villain song should do, and I think it's clearly what it does, and I enjoy it for that very much. Now, the next song that I wanted to briefly discuss is actually a song that wasn't included in the film. This particular song was supposed to be intended for the film, but they decided not to include it, and instead they have an instrumental version of it. And that song is called Never Smile at a Crocodile, in the film Peter Pan. There are probably various reasons as to exactly why they chose to cut it, but it's basically the same melody when you hear the crocodile. Every time you hear the crocodile come You know, that do 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 tick tock tick tock. You know, that's pretty much the whole song. Even though it does seem a little rather simplistic, it still has this interesting kind of sound to it that I think makes it fairly catchy to listen to. And I really like how the song sort of encapsulates the whole sort of personality kind of the crocodile, you know, and what you're not really supposed to do to a crocodile. And I think even though the song is not really saying as much, it still says something, I think, to kids as a whole. And even when I was young, I could still kind of identify with the idea of I shouldn't be so open maybe into trusting people, in particular strangers and such. And I think the whole concept of a crocodile and trying not to not be taken in by his welcome grin, I think really brings out that whole kind of childhood nostalgia within me that says, yeah, I should watch out and I should be afraid. But at the same time, even though the song isn't so much and isn't saying a whole lot, it still offers, I think, a bit more of a lighthearted way into approaching the crocodile's role in Peter Pan, which is basically to come and eat Captain Hook. But it's interesting, though, how the lyrics sort of suggest more of how the audience should feel about the crocodile, and how the audience shouldn't smile at the crocodile, and how it even says, clear the aisle and never smile at Mr. Crocodile. It has these interesting, I think, rhymes to it, and even though it is fairly simplistic and catchy, it still, I think, has this sort of entertainment value to it that makes it unique. And it's kind of amusing to listen to when you put in the sing-alongs, especially when it basically plays over the scenes and where Captain Hook is trying to struggle with the crocodile. And I think it just brings out that sort of more lightheartedness and kind of slapstick that went into Peter Pan. And I can understand, though, why they would take it out, because it does seem a little bit of it does seem like a song that would kind of distract from the main purpose, but it even still feels like the song is trying to have this kind of light-hearted sound to it that makes it seem like, yeah, just, you know, don't smile at the crocodile, you know, otherwise look what happens. And what actually ends up happening is intended to be a little bit more amusing rather than frightening. And it's fairly interesting, because I remember always at the end when they would sing "Clear the Aisle and Never Smile, Mr. Crocodile," they would show Captain Hook and him being held onto by the crocodile, and then when every time it would say "dial," Captain Hook would somehow manage to escape and then just kind of glide along the water all the way to where we never see him again, because that's the last bit of What's a Captain Hook in the entire movie. So it's sort of interesting how Disney made this song and then ultimately decided, now we're just not going to include it. But at the same time, I think it still offers an interesting look into the sort of humor that is with a sort of side character that really plays a big role into sort of the comedy of Peter Pan, and in particular the slapstick that happens in Peter Pan. So I think that's really all I can say about that song as a whole. It's fairly simplistic and straightforward. Now, the next song that I wanted to mention is actually a song that not a lot of people probably remember or know. But it's called I Wonder, and this is from Sleeping Beauty. Usually people on the list, I thought it was interesting how they would put Once Upon a Dream as underrated, and I go, okay, how many hits does this have on YouTube? And it's over like 1 million something, and I go, I think Once Upon a Dream is fairly known, but not a lot of people I think have heard of I Wonder. Now, I Wonder basically is the song before Once Upon a Dream, and it's basically when Aurora is in the forest and she's picking berries, and she's talking about how she wonders about sort of love, and thinks about somebody that she would like to find, maybe, you know, just sort of it's sort of like a daydreamy-esque song in a similar way of Once Upon a Dream is, except it involves more of a duet, as well as a chorus at the end, or choir. But really, what I like about I Wonder is just how it's fairly short. And not only is it short, but it's only Aurora singing, and the woman that I believe did her voice was an opera singer, so that definitely makes sense, that her voice would be probably one of the most prettiest out of, I think, a lot of the Disney princesses. I mean, you can say whatever you want about Aurora, but I have to say she probably has the best voice. And I think her voice is unique in that sense because of the fact that she was an opera singer, compared to a lot of the other Disney princesses who are more of that musical style and have a musical style-esque voice. And hers is fairly like opera and fairly high and also delicate too. And instead of more powerhouse and entertaining like a musical like Pa, it's fairly flowy, and I think that's what I appreciate so much about the song. And even though the song is fairly short, the song is not all that long. I think the longest song that I have on the lists so far is The World's Greatest Criminal Mind. But I do admire this song for this simplicity, and I think it is a nice song that ultimately ends up leading into Once Upon a Dream. And I just like how she's just, you know, kind of reminiscing and thinking, and, you know, letting her kind of imagination take hold within her. And you kind of do feel that within her voice as she's singing. You do feel that there's this sense of wonder within her as to what she thinks will end up happening to her. And as she goes into this kind of daydreamy state, and it's just fairly pleasant, and it's nice to have the animals there too, and I think the animals are actually the most appropriate in I Wonder compared to Once Upon a Dream, where they kind of try to take up some time too from the couple. And within I Wonder, it feels a little bit more natural to me that she would sort of have these companions with her and have them sort of tweeting along and offering some kind of background music, in particular the birds, because the birds tweet sometimes before she's about to sing something. And I just think it fits because it just feels so pleasant, and it does feel like you're in a forest and you're within that kind of a world where these things actually do kind of happen, and it kind of just takes you there. And that's what I like about it so much, and I just admire the fact that it does it in such the simplest form that you can repeat it over and over again. And I find myself never getting tired of it, because even though it's short, its simplicity and its delicate beauty is what I really admire about it. Even though ultimately the whole scene that really plays out, with like the characters and stuff, is not really all that interesting, but just the whole visual aspects to the song, as well as her singing voice, I think make it feel fairly intimate and homey and almost dreamlike. So that's all I think it can really say about that song for the most part. It's fairly simple in what it's trying to say. Now the next song that I wanted to mention is actually not really from a Disney film so much as it is from a sing-along, and it's called By the Beautiful Sea. And I really like how it just has this feeling of nostalgia, at least when I listen to it, and it's nice to hear sort of this kind of familiar feeling of maybe going to the beach or going on an adventure or going with somebody somewhere and enjoying life. I think that's really what this song feels like to me when I listen to it. And also with the visuals with Mickey and Minnie and all these other characters too, I think really make it also fairly unique and fairly cutesy. And especially when within the lyrics, when they say, then each wave comes a rolling in, and you actually see a wave roll in, and it actually gets Minnie at one point. And I just think it suits it so well, and it just feels like the visuals just flow well with the song too. And it's also nice to see with the sing-alongs too how the song just bounces with the little mouse as you go along, which is rather cute. I always love that from Disney sing-alongs. But yeah, I definitely would recommend By the Beautiful Sea. It's fairly simple. Even though it doesn't really feel so much about the beach, it does feel like it has this kind of pretty nostalgic tone to it that I think can be identifiable for a lot of people, and just goes well with the visuals and how the characters sort of fit within that visual mold of, being together and just spending time and having fun. It really brings out that for the most part. It's not really a character driven or a or a plot-driven song. It's just supposed to be simplistic, and it's sort of meant to just take you away, and it does make you feel like you're a part of the cartoon as well, and experiencing it as you watch Minnie and Mickey as they go on their little beach outing. But I think that's really all I can say about that song. Now the next one I wanted to mention is fairly straightforward. Hi Diddle Dee Dee by or in the film Pinocchio. This song, boy, is this song catchy. It's unbelievably catchy. I don't know why a lot of people don't really reference this song. Again, it is short, almost as short as probably I Wonder, maybe even shorter than that. But despite its shortness, it really does serve a big point in the plot, and it kind of makes you understand why Pinocchio is so easily manipulated by someone like Honest John and the cat, because of just the way how they approach the whole aspect of acting, and how they talk about the theater, and say how you'll be able to do all of these things because you're able to act, and you'll be happy, and you'll just be the coolest person ever. It really is a fairly manipulative song, but it just has such a charm and such an upbeat attitude to it that you can't help but feel like you're going somewhere when you listen to it, and that you're gonna be something while you listen to it. And it's kind of the same reaction that Jiminy Cricket even gets out of it at one point, which you will see. And it just goes to show that how resignative a song can be as to how the plot moves, and to how the characters are taken from one place to another. And I think this song, just even though it's so simple, it does speak into what you feel or what you would probably feel if you were under those kinds of circumstances, and if you were a child, maybe being presented to, and having a stranger present you such a entertaining type-esque song. You know, it has that kind of just appeal to it that it seems only that Disney can bring to the table, and it's just so just so amusing. It's amusing to watch. It's amusing to take in, and I really do enjoy the song for what it is, even though it is short and it is pretty straightforward. Now, another song that I wanted to bring up was a song in Bambi, and Bambi isn't particularly known for its songs. I think April Shower is probably the most that people know out of the songs that are in Bambi. But I Bring You a Song is, even though again fairly short, not the longest song in the world, but at the same time, with the visuals and with the intimacy and the atmosphere that it creates, it's just a splendor. It's so enjoyable, I think, to watch, even though it's so short. But basically, I Bring You a Song is more of a love song of Bambi, between Bambi and Feline, the other, or well, the doe, I guess you would say, because I think that's the female version of male, yeah, or a female version of a deer. But basically, they just kind of prance around, and then you see the visuals of the nature and their surroundings. And even though it's fairly dark, for the most part, because they are going around in these kinds of areas within nighttime. You still feel the sort of the atmosphere really well. You do feel like you're watching something sort of reach out to you in that same way, especially with nature. I think Bambi's really well known for its visuals, and just how the song uses the visuals to sort of enhance the mood and build the song as it progresses, I think just really speaks volumes, even though it's just so short. But ultimately, I think it's what makes this song so interesting, and I find it to be fairly appealing, and I think a lot of people would find it nice, even though it is fairly short and simple. It still has this sort of beauty, and within that beauty, a fairly simplistic nature, in a similar way as to I Wonder, except I Wonder is maybe a bit more colorful and light, and this one's a little bit more dark and foreboding, but at the same time still fairly beautiful and intimate. So it's fairly interesting, and I definitely would recommend it to those who have not paid attention to that one point in Bambi. Because again, yeah, Bambi is more of a visual treat than necessarily so much entertaining, but I think you can just watch that scene alone and really get something out of it, instead of even watching the entire film. But I think that's really all I can say about that song. Now, the second to last song I wanted to mention was In a World of My Own, and this is in Alice in Wonderland. And what I really like about this song is I like how it pretty much sets up who sort of Alice, or what Alice really kind of wants as a character, especially when she kind of states what she would have in her world, and sort of discusses how her world would be different from the regular, ordinary world. And I think it just brings out so much imagination, and it does it in such a laid-back sense. And I think that's what we kind of sort of dream about sometimes, is if we could just, go into our own little world and just relax and enjoy life. And I think that kind of feeling is really what Alice wants in the beginning, and you really do get a sense of that with how she sings it. And I just think overall it's a really well done song, with the visuals and how she shows how her world would be different, and you kind of get a sense of the surroundings, and it sets this fairly laid back tone, and I just like that it feels a lot different than Alice's actual dream. Almost the opposite, because again, what she wants ends up not being what ultimately ends up happening within her world. So it's a kind of a contrast to the song itself is kind of a contrast into a lot of all the other songs that are within the movie, but I do like how it kind of establishes this kind of contrast of what Alice expects compared to what she actually gets from being in a different world. So I find that fairly fascinating, and it's nice to see this kind of simplistic song and have it be about just what you see within your imagination. And I think that's definitely a lot of what Walt was inspired by, and I think what a lot of people within Disney even today aspire to, is the whole concept of imagination and thinking outside the box, while at the same time having this simplicity of being happy and feeling like there's no other care in the world. I think that's what a lot of people aspire to, and I think a lot of people find to be fairly appealing. But I think that's ultimately all that I can say about that song. And lastly, the last song that I wanted to mention was, and is called, That's What Makes the World Go Round. And this is by the film The Sword and the Stone. Now this song is again fairly simplistic and straightforward. It's basically Merlin, who is the wizard, teaching Arthur, the future King Arthur, in this case Boy Arthur, or technically Fish Arthur because they're fishes in this song because they turn into fishes. But basically he's just trying to explain to Arthur sort of how the world works and how you have these contrasting and different aspects within the world. And I think that's fairly important to teach to kids at a young age. And I think even though it seems a little bit educational at times, it still feels fairly informative, I think, even to adults too, because it brings up such interesting points. Like at one point within the song, Merlin states to Arthur, "Don't be a mediocrity," and he sort of says, "Don't just wait and trust to fate and say that's how it's meant to be, and it's up to you how far you go. If you don't try, you'll never know. And so, my lad, as I've explained, nothing ventured, nothing gained." So really he's saying that you never know anything unless you try, and unless you take a step and do something about it. And I think a lot of people sort of miss that within life, and maybe have had opportunities and did not see them to the fullest. And I think it's important as people grow up to teach younger people too about these kinds of aspects, and how we should try to live as much as we can to the fullest, and just try, no matter what ends up happening, just to keep going. And it's better to go and try and fail than to not pursue anything at all. And I think that's fairly telling to a lot of people. And what I admire too is how catchy it is. It does feel like one of those simplistically catchy Disney songs where it kind of feels a little bit like a sort of a sing-along, and almost like an ABC type-esque song, like ABCD, in that it goes to and fro, stop and go. That's what makes the world go around. But I just admire that it can take simplistic lyrics and subject matter and make it into something that even adults can identify with, as well as kids. And that's what I think makes the song so interesting. It's just how it expresses this idea of teaching kids the sort of different paths that you can take and different ways to go, and how there's these contrasting things within life that make up the whole world for the most part. Like there's a day and there's a night, there's a left, there's a right. And I think these simple concepts can enhance kids' understanding of the world and allow them to open their minds to the possibilities of what they can do with knowing simplistic things. So I think that's ultimately all I can say about the song. It's just fairly straightforward in that and it's also interesting how even within the lyrics too, it says for every high there is a low, for every two there is a fro. Sort of, you have your ups, you have your downs in life. You have points of going left, points of going right. There's just a lot of things that encompass life, and it's just sort of like how, and in the end the song's sort of asking you how you deal with them and how do you take each opportunity that comes to you. And that's sort of what Merlin says towards sort of the middle of the song with if you never try, you'll never know. But I think that's really all I can say about all of these songs. They're all fairly interesting, and I find them fairly enjoyable for the most part. But I think, again, that's really all I can say. But any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them, and I'll be sure to put the links below so you can check out all the songs within order of how I mentioned them. And until next time, everybody.